The little black girl's scream cut through the quiet evening like a knife. Please help my mama. The billionaire is beating her. People on the street turned, startled. A group of bikers standing near their parked motorcycles froze in shock. The leader, a tall, broad man with a scar across his jaw, stepped forward slowly. His name was Big Ron, and his deep voice carried authority. Say that again, kid, he said, lowering himself to her level. The girl was barefoot, her face pale and streaked with tears. Her hair was messy, her little blue dress dusty as if she had run all the way from somewhere far. He's hurting my mama, she said in a shaky voice. Mr. Victor Grant, the billionaire who lives up there on the hill. She works for him. He's beating her right now. The men exchanged uneasy looks. Everyone in the area knew Victor Grant. Rich, powerful, and untouchable. He owned the factories, the hotels, the schools, even half the farmland. But no one dared to speak against him. Ron looked at the child again. What's your mama's name? Maria. Maria Lopez, the girl whispered. She cleans his house. She didn't come home last night. I went to find her today, and I saw him shouting and hitting her. She was crying, but nobody helped. Ron's expression hardened. And what's your name, little one? Lila, she said softly, wiping her face. Ron took a deep breath and stood tall. His dark eyes turned toward the glowing mansion visible in the distance. All right, Lila, he said quietly. We'll help your mama. The men nodded. They didn't need more words. The sound of engines filled the air as they mounted their motorcycles. Lila sat behind Ron, clutching his jacket tightly as they sped toward the grand mansion that sparkled under the city lights. When they reached the iron gates, two guards stepped forward immediately. This is private property, one of them barked. Ron's voice was calm but sharp. We're here for Maria Lopez. The guards hesitated. Mr. Grant doesn't want any visitors. Ron cut him off. Then he's got a problem, because we're not visitors. The guards tried to block them, but Ron's glare made them freeze. He pushed open the gate himself and walked up the long driveway, boots echoing against the stone path. The mansion was massive, white walls, tall windows, and golden lights glowing through heavy curtains. But inside, something terrible was happening. From behind the large doors, a man's voice roared. You worthless woman. I gave you everything, and you still betray me. Ron didn't wait another second. He shoved the doors open. Victor Grant stood in the center of the marble floor, dressed in a fine suit, his face red with rage. Beside him, Maria was on the ground, her cheek bruised, her hands trembling as she tried to protect herself. Lila screamed and ran to her. Mama! Victor spun around in shock. Who are you people? Ron stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow over the billionaire. The people who don't watch while a man beats a woman. Victor's jaw tightened. You have no idea who you're talking to. I can destroy you all. Ron's voice dropped lower. Try. Maria coughed weakly, her voice trembling. Ron, please, take Lila away. But Lila clung to her. I'm not leaving you, Mama. Victor snapped. Get them out of my house. They don't belong here. Ron's tone sharpened. You lost your right to talk about belonging the moment you raised your hand against her. Victor's face twisted with anger. He turned to his desk, yanked open a drawer, and pulled out a gun. Get out before I. Ron didn't move. His calm made Victor hesitate. You're really going to shoot a child? Ron asked quietly. In your own house? Victor's hand trembled. You don't understand. She's a liar. She was going to ruin me. Ruin you how? Ron asked. Victor's eyes darted to Maria. She stole something. She found things she shouldn't have seen. Maria, still weak but gathering her courage, looked up. I saw everything, Victor. The papers, the deals, the workers you're using like slaves. I was going to expose you. Victor's expression turned cold. You should have kept your mouth shut. Before he could raise the gun, Ron lunged forward and knocked it from his hand. The gun skidded across the floor as the two men struggled. Victor swung wildly, but Ron caught his arm and pinned him against the wall. It's over, Ron growled. The other bikers held Victor down while Ron turned toward Maria. You're safe now, he said gently. Maria's lips trembled. You shouldn't have come. He's not the only one. Ron frowned. What do you mean? Maria's eyes darted toward the hallway. There are others. They know what he's been doing. If he goes down, they'll come after anyone who helps. Before Ron could ask more, police sirens echoed outside. One of the bikers had already called them. Officers stormed in and handcuffed Victor Grant, who shouted threats even as they dragged him away. "You'll all pay for this," he screamed. "You don't know who I am." Ron ignored him and helped Maria to her feet. Lila clung to her mother's arm, still crying. "Mama, it's over. You're safe now." Maria shook her head slightly. "No, sweetheart. It's not over. There's something else, something in the basement. That's where he hides everything." Ron's eyes narrowed. "What's in the basement?" Maria hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. "People, Ron. I think he's keeping people down there." The bikers fell silent. Even the officers outside didn't seem to notice the tension spreading through the room. Ron took a slow breath. "Then we're not done here." He looked at two of his men. "Stay with Maria and Lila." Then he turned toward the dark hallway leading deeper into the mansion. The air felt heavier as he walked down, every step echoing louder than the last. He didn't know what he was about to find, but he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about saving one woman anymore. It was about uncovering something much darker. Ron moved slowly down the hallway, his boots thudding against the marble floor. The mansion was silent now, but not peacefully silent. It was the kind of silence that hides something. He passed through the glittering dining room, the huge portraits on the walls watching him like ghosts. At the far end of the hall, he saw a heavy steel door slightly hidden behind a curtain. He pushed the curtain aside. The door had a digital lock. That alone told him enough. No one was supposed to go down there. He turned to one of his men. "Get me something to break this." Within seconds, one of the bikers handed him a metal rod. Ron jammed it into the lock and pried it open with a sharp crack. The door creaked, revealing a flight of stairs leading into darkness. A cold breeze came up from below. He looked back. "Stay here. If anything happens, get Maria and the kid out." Then he started down. Each step echoed deeper. The air smelled damp, mixed with something metallic, like blood or rust. A faint light glowed from the bottom of the stairs. When Ron reached the final step, what he saw made his stomach twist. There were cages. Real, metal cages. Inside them, 3 terrified men sat huddled together, thin, bruised, and weak. One of them looked up when Ron appeared. "Please help us," he whispered. Ron knelt beside the bars. "Who did this to you?" The man coughed weakly. "Grant. He kept us here. We worked in his factories. When we found out what he was doing, he said we'd disappear." Ron's eyes burned with anger. "How long have you been here?" "Months," the man said. "He told everyone we quit. He takes people who talk too much. No one ever comes back." Ron stood, fists clenched. He shouted up the stairs, "Get the cops down here now." The bikers came running, followed by 2 officers. Their flashlights swept the room, revealing more evidence. Files stacked in crates, photos, recordings, money. Everything Victor had hidden to protect his empire. One officer muttered, "My God, this man's been running a whole underground operation." Ron pointed to the cages. "Get them out first." As the police freed the captives, Maria appeared at the top of the stairs, leaning on the wall for support. Lila was beside her, still holding her hand. When Maria saw the cages, she gasped. "I told you," she whispered. "He was doing something evil." Ron nodded. "You were right." But before anyone could speak further, a gunshot echoed through the mansion. Everyone froze. Another shot followed, closer this time. The officer nearest the door shouted, "Upstairs. Someone's shooting." Ron didn't hesitate. He ran up the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding. The moment he reached the main hall, he saw one of the officers lying on the floor, shot in the leg. The sound of footsteps came from outside. Through the open doors, headlights flashed. A black SUV was speeding down the driveway. "It's his men," the injured officer groaned. "They came for him." Ron grabbed a fallen pistol and ran outside. 3 armed men jumped out of the SUV, firing wildly toward the entrance. The bikers ducked behind the stone walls and returned fire. The mansion's peaceful glow turned into a battlefield. Ron shouted, "Keep them away from the house. Maria and Lila are inside." One of the bikers, a tall man named Jax, rolled out and shot a tire, sending the SUV spinning sideways. The attackers scrambled for cover, but they were no match for Ron's crew. Within minutes, 2 of them were disarmed and pinned to the ground. The third tried to run but was tackled by Jax. Ron grabbed the man by the collar. "Who sent you?" The man's lip bled. "You think this ends with Grant? He's just a small piece. There are bigger names. You don't know who you're messing with." Ron's eyes narrowed. "Then tell me." The man only laughed. "They'll come for you next." Police backup arrived. sirens wailing through the night. Officers took the attackers into custody. Ron stepped back, breathing heavily, watching the chaos settle. Inside, Maria and Lila waited near the door, terrified. When Ron entered, Lila ran to him. "Is it over?" she asked. Ron looked at her for a moment before answering. For now. Maria's eyes were full of fear. He wasn't lying. Victor worked for someone else. There were calls, meetings with strange men. He always said, "They're the real owners." Ron frowned. "You think they'll come after you?" Maria hesitated. "After tonight? I'm sure of it." He looked at her, and then at Lila. "Then you both stay with us for now? No arguments." Lila blinked. "With the bikers?" Ron smiled slightly. "We're not just bikers, kid. We look out for our own." The police spent hours collecting evidence from the basement, documenting every file and recording. By the time the last officer left, dawn was creeping across the sky. The mansion, once bright and proud, now looked broken, its owner in jail, its secrets exposed. Ron stood on the steps, watching the sunrise. Jax joined him. "You think that's the end of it?" he asked. Ron shook his head slowly. "No, this was just the front door. There's more behind it." Jax looked over his shoulder at Maria and Lila, who sat quietly on the back of a police car. "You gonna tell them?" "Not yet," Ron said quietly. "They've been through enough. But we need to find out who those men work for." As the sun rose higher, Ron took one last look at the mansion. Somewhere in his gut, he knew this wasn't over. Someone bigger was pulling the strings, and Victor Grant had just been the first piece to fall. He turned to his men. "Let's move. We've got work to do." Lila watched as the bikers mounted their motorcycles again, their engines roaring like thunder. She held her mother's hand tightly and whispered, "Mama, he saved you." Maria smiled weakly, tears in her eyes. "Yes, my love, but I think he's about to save a lot more people." And as the bikers rode away into the distance, the story of a janitor's daughter and a gang who stood up to a billionaire was only beginning to spread. Because heroes don't always wear badges or suits. Sometimes, they wear leather and ride machines that roar like freedom. 2 days later, the town was buzzing. Everyone had heard what happened at the billionaire's mansion, how a janitor's daughter had exposed a monster, and how a group of bikers had brought justice when no one else dared. News crews came and went, reporters crowded outside the police station, and people whispered Victor Grant's name with a mix of fear and relief. But inside the small diner on the edge of town, Ron sat quietly in a corner booth, his coffee untouched. His men were scattered around the place, watching the windows like hawks. He wasn't celebrating. He was thinking. Jax leaned forward. "You've been staring at that cup for 10 minutes, boss. What's on your mind?" Ron didn't look up. Grant's arrest happened too easy. Jax frowned. "What do you mean?" "We caught him red-handed. The cops saw everything." "Exactly," Ron said, his tone low. "But what about those men who showed up shooting? They weren't random thugs. They moved like trained security. And that guy we caught, he said Grant worked for someone else." The table went silent. Ron looked out the window toward the police station across the street. Someone big was backing him. And that someone isn't going to stay quiet after losing him. Just then, a young woman walked into the diner, Maria. She looked better, her bruises fading, her hair tied neatly. But her eyes still carried fear. Lila followed her, holding a small teddy bear someone from the biker crew had given her. "Ron," Maria said softly, approaching the table. "Can we talk?" Ron nodded. "Sit down." She took a seat, glancing nervously around. "I talked to one of the officers," she began. "He said they can't find all of Victor's files. The police searched everything, but some of his records, bank accounts, shipment lists, phone logs, they're gone." Ron's eyes narrowed. "Gone?" Maria nodded. "Someone deleted them from his servers the night of the arrest." Jax muttered. "That means someone cleaned up his mess." Maria's voice trembled slightly. "Before you came, Victor was on a call. I heard him say something like, 'The Foundation will handle the rest.' Then he saw me listening and hit me. I didn't understand it then, but now," Ron repeated the name quietly. "The Foundation." He leaned back, deep in thought. "Sounds like an organization. Maybe the ones funding his operations." Maria nodded. "I think they're still out there. And they won't stop. If they find out I talked, they'll come for me and Lila." Ron looked at her firmly. "Then they'll have to go through me first." Just as he said that, one of the bikers came running in. "Boss," he said breathlessly, "you need to see this." He turned on the small TV above the counter. The news reporter was speaking fast. Breaking news. Victor Grant was found dead in his holding cell early this morning. Police say it was an apparent suicide, but sources claim the surveillance cameras stopped working minutes before it happened. Maria gasped. No, they killed him. Ron's jaw tightened. To silence him. The reporter continued. Authorities are now investigating whether Grant's death is connected to an underground network known as the Foundation, believed to be involved in illegal labor and money laundering operations. Jax looked at Ron. You called it. Ron pushed away his coffee cup. We need to find out who's behind it. Before they find her. He turned to Maria. You remember anything else about that call? A name? A location? She hesitated, then slowly nodded. Yes, he mentioned a place. The dockyard. I think he said the next shipment leaves from there. Ron's eyes met Jax's. The dockyard's old and abandoned, right? Jax nodded. Yeah, mostly. But I heard some nights there are trucks moving in and out. No one knows why. Ron stood up. Then that's where we're going. Maria grabbed his arm. Ron, please. It's dangerous. You already did enough. Ron looked down at Lila, who stared up at him with innocent eyes full of trust. I started this when I walked into that mansion, he said. I'm not stopping until it's over. That night, the bikers rode through the industrial district, engines echoing against the silent warehouses. The dockyard sat at the end of the road, massive metal gates rusted but still guarded by a few armed men. The air smelled of oil and salt from the nearby harbor. Ron raised a hand, signaling his men to cut the engines. They crouched behind a line of shipping containers. From there, they could see it clearly, trucks being loaded with large wooden crates, men moving fast under floodlights. Jax whispered, That's no normal shipment. Look at the markings, Syndic Corporation. Never seen that before. Ron frowned. Neither have I, but I bet it's part of the Foundation. They watched as a man in a gray suit came out of a small office near the dock. He spoke briefly with the workers and then made a call on his phone. His face was partially visible under the light. Sharp features, clean cut, confident. That must be their contact, Ron muttered. He took out his phone and started recording. We'll get evidence first. Then we call the cops. But before they could move, a flashlight swept across their position. Hey, who's there? A guard shouted. The bikers ducked, but it was too late. The guards raised their weapons, and chaos erupted. Shots cracked through the night air. The bikers scrambled for cover, returning fire as bullets ricocheted off the containers. Ron shouted, Don't let them escape. One truck started its engine, trying to pull away with the crates. Jax jumped onto his bike and sped after it, swerving between the gunfire. He rammed the back of the truck, forcing it to stop. The driver jumped out and ran, but Ron caught him. He shoved the man against the container. What's in the crates? The man spat on the ground. You shouldn't have come here. The Foundation sees everything. Ron pressed harder. What are they moving? The man hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. People, he whispered. They're moving people. Ron froze. You mean, they sell them? The man said, trembling. Workers, refugees, anyone desperate. Grant was one of their clients. There are dozens more. Ron's stomach twisted. He turned toward the truck. Open it. Inside, under dim light, were cages, smaller this time, hidden behind tarps. A few weak voices called out. Help us, please. Ron clenched his fists. Get them out, he ordered. The bikers helped the captives out while the police sirens began echoing again, called by one of the crew. But as Ron looked back toward the dark horizon, he saw a black car speeding away from the dock. The man in the gray suit was gone. He knew this wasn't the end. It was only getting deeper. The police arrived minutes after the gunfire stopped. Blue and red lights painted the dockyard walls, and officers stormed the area, rounding up the surviving guards. The rescued captives were taken into ambulances, shivering and weak, but finally safe. Ron stood near the truck, his hands still shaking from anger. Jax walked up beside him, wiping the sweat and dirt from his face. We did it, boss. We stopped them. Ron shook his head. No, we only cut one branch. The root's still out there. A detective approached, holding a notepad. Mr. Ron, right? The police chief wants to thank you for your help, but I need your statement. Ron gave him a sharp look. Make sure those people get care first. I'll talk later. The detective nodded and left, and Ron turned to see Maria and Lila standing at the edge of the scene. They had arrived just as the ambulances were leaving, their faces pale under the flashing lights. Maria's eyes filled with tears when she saw the cages being carried away. That's what they were doing, she whispered. All this time, Victor wasn't just hurting me. He was part of something much worse. Ron put a comforting hand on her shoulder. You're safe now, but we have to be ready. They'll come after anyone who talks. Lila hugged his leg tightly, silent but scared. Ron looked down at her and gave a small smile. Don't worry, kid. No one's touching your mama again. The next morning, the headlines exploded. Billionaire's death linked to human trafficking network. Local biker crew helps expose national criminal ring. The whole town saw Ron and his team as heroes. But Ron wasn't smiling. He knew the story wasn't over. In his small workshop, the bikers gathered around a table littered with newspaper clippings, photos, and maps. A laptop in front of them showed blurry surveillance footage from the dockyard, the black car speeding away. That's him, Jack said, pointing. The guy in the gray suit. We've got partial plates. 9x3 something. Ron nodded. Run it through the system. Any hit, we move. Just then, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered cautiously. A cold voice came through. Mr. Ron. Brave of you to play hero. Ron's muscles tensed. Who is this? You already know, the voice replied smoothly. You've interfered with the Foundation's work. That's a mistake we don't forgive. Ron clenched his jaw. Then come fix it yourself. The voice chuckled. We will. But first, we'll take back what belongs to us. The line went dead. Ron froze. He turned sharply to Jax. Find Maria? Now. They sped through town on their bikes, engines roaring. When they reached Maria's small apartment building, the door was wide open. Inside, the place was a mess. Drawers pulled out, furniture smashed. Lila's teddy bear lay torn on the floor. Maria, Ron shouted, running from room to room. No answer. Then he spotted a note pinned to the wall with a knife. It read, Trade the evidence for the girl. Doc 17. Midnight. Jax cursed under his breath. They've got her. Ron picked up the note, his eyes burning with fury. They want the evidence we took from the dockyard. The USB drive with the files. They think they can scare me. Jax stepped closer. Boss, what if it's a trap? It is, Ron said flatly. And we're walking right into it. That night, the dockyard was darker than before. The lights shut off, the air thick and heavy with silence. Ron stood beside his bike, leather jacket zipped up, the USB drive clutched in his hand. His crew surrounded him, ready but tense. All right, he said quietly. We do this clean. Get the girl out first. No unnecessary fighting unless they start it. Jax loaded his pistol. They'll start it. Ron gave a thin smile. Then we finish it. They moved silently along the docks until they reached Dock 17. A single light flickered above the water. Under it stood the man in the gray suit, calm as ever, with two guards holding Lila between them. Her hands were tied, and she was crying softly. Ron stepped forward. Let her go. The man smiled faintly. You came alone? Ron gestured toward his pocket. I brought what you want. The man nodded. Good. Hand it over, and maybe she lives. Ron slowly held up the USB drive. But before he could move closer, Jax's voice whispered through his earpiece. Boss, there's movement, snipers on the cranes. Ron's eyes flickered. He knew what to do. He tossed the USB into the air. The man's eyes followed it. And in that split second, Ron pulled a smoke grenade from his belt and threw it. The dock exploded into chaos. Thick smoke rolled across the area, and gunfire erupted. The bikers charged in from both sides, engines roaring, headlights cutting through the fog like lightning. Ron dashed forward through the smoke, dodging bullets until he reached Lila. He cut her ropes and lifted her into his arms. You're safe now, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. Behind him, Jax tackled one of the guards while another biker knocked out the second. The man in the gray suit backed away, coughing, his gun drawn. You can't stop the Foundation, he shouted. We're everywhere. Ron aimed his pistol at him. Then I'll start right here. The man fired first, but Ron moved faster. One shot rang out. The man staggered, dropped his weapon, and fell. When the smoke cleared, the dockyard was silent again. The remaining guards fled, the bikers victorious but exhausted. Lila clung to Ron's neck, whispering, I knew you'd come. Ron smiled softly. Always, kid. They handed the evidence to the police that night. Everything from the USB, plus footage of the dockyard operation. The files revealed dozens of names, locations, and accounts tied to the Foundation's network. Within days, raids began across multiple cities. But Ron knew they hadn't caught everyone. Powerful men always had ways of slipping through cracks. As he stood outside the police station later, watching the sunrise, Maria approached him, holding Lila's hand. "You saved us again," she said quietly. Ron shook his head. "No. You saved yourself the moment you stood up to him. I just helped finish the fight." Maria smiled through tears. "We can never repay you." Ron placed a hand on Lila's head. "Just live free. That's enough." Jax walked over, smirking. "So, boss, what now? You think the foundation's done?" Ron looked toward the horizon, eyes narrowing. "No. But they know my name now. And that's enough to keep them running for a while." As the sun climbed higher, the engines of the bikes roared once again. The crew rode off into the distance. Not as criminals, but as heroes who stood up when no one else would. Weeks passed since the night at Dock 17. The town had returned to its quiet rhythm, but whispers of the foundation still floated through the air like ghosts that refused to fade. The police raids had shut down dozens of operations, but their leader, the one who commanded it all, was still out there. Ron and his crew were back at their garage, fixing bikes, pretending everything was normal. But everyone could feel it, a strange tension, like calm before another storm. Jax walked in holding a newspaper. "Another one," he said, tossing it on the table. The headline read, "Foundation leader still at large, authorities tight-lipped." Ron sighed. "They're either protecting someone or too scared to dig deeper." Jax leaned against the wall. "You think we'll ever find him?" Ron looked up slowly. "We don't have to. He'll find us. Men like that always come looking to clean up loose ends." Just then, his phone buzzed. Unknown number again. He hesitated, then answered. A soft female voice spoke, trembling slightly. "Ron, it's Maria." Ron straightened immediately. "Maria? What's wrong?" I think someone's watching the house," she whispered. "There's a car parked across the street. It's been there all day." I tried to ignore it, but when I looked again, the man inside, he smiled at me. Ron stood up fast. "Stay inside. Lock the doors. I'm coming right now." Within minutes, the roar of engines echoed through the street. The bikers arrived outside Maria's small home, headlights cutting through the dusk. The black car across the street pulled away slowly as they arrived. Ron jumped off his bike and shouted, "Follow it." Jax and two others sped after the car, weaving through traffic. Ron rushed inside Maria's house. She was clutching Lila tightly, fear in her eyes. "Did they hurt you?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. But before the car left, the man put something in our mailbox." Ron opened it and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a single photo, a picture of Maria standing beside a man in a lab coat. On the back, written in black ink, were the words, "You were part of us once. You know how this ends." Ron looked at her sharply. "Maria, what is this?" Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't want you to know. Before I met Victor, I worked for a research company in the city, a front for the foundation. I didn't know what they were really doing. They said they were studying labor systems, helping poor families find work. But I found out the truth. They were selling people, using fake contracts. When I threatened to report them, Victor came. He told me to keep quiet. Or else." Ron's expression hardened. "So you were their whistleblower?" Maria nodded slowly. "And Victor? He wasn't my husband when I met him. He was my handler. They sent him to control me. When I tried to escape, he married me, to keep me under their watch." Ron clenched his fists. "And when you finally stood up, they sent him to punish you." Maria's tears streamed freely. "Yes. And now they're coming for me again." Just then, Jax's voice crackled through the radio. "Boss, we lost the car. It vanished on Highway 8, like it just disappeared." Ron looked out the window into the dark street. "They're not running. They're circling." He turned back to Maria. "We're getting you both out of here." But before they could move, the power in the house went out. Total darkness. Then, headlights outside. Dozens of them. A convoy of black SUVs rolled up the street, engines humming like a beast awakening. Jax's voice shouted through the radio again, "Boss, we've got company." Ron grabbed his gun. "Keep them back. Don't let them reach the door." Glass shattered as the first shot ripped through the window. The bikers outside took cover behind their motorcycles, returning fire. The quiet street became a war zone. Ron pulled Maria and Lila toward the back room. "Stay down. Don't move." He turned back toward the living room, firing at the figures moving through the shadows. The Foundation's men were everywhere, silent, organized, deadly. Jax crashed his bike into one of the SUVs. using it as cover while his men pushed forward. "We can't hold them long, boss," he shouted. Ron reloaded, sweat dripping down his face. "We don't need long." Then, from the distance, a thunderous explosion shook the ground. One of the bikers had thrown a grenade toward the lead vehicle, flipping it over. Flames burst into the night sky, lighting up the street. Ron seized the moment, grabbing Maria and Lila. "Now, move." They ran out through the back alley, gunfire echoing behind them. The air was thick with smoke and chaos. Ron led them to his truck parked nearby, pushed them inside, and slammed the door. "Hold on," he shouted, flooring the gas. The truck roared to life and sped away. Tires screeching as bullets shattered the back window. They raced through the city streets until the noise faded behind them. Only then did Ron slow down. Lila was crying softly in Maria's arms, but alive. Maria looked at him, shaken. "They won't stop, Ron. You know that." He nodded. "Then we don't hide. We finish this." They drove to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, one of the Foundation's old facilities Maria once worked in. Inside, the walls were covered in old files and computer equipment. Ron grabbed a crowbar, pried open a locked cabinet, and pulled out dusty folders. "This is it," Maria said, flipping through them. The list. Every name. Every location. Ron picked up his phone and called the detective who helped them before. "Detective Harris? It's time you earned that badge. I've got everything you need to burn the Foundation down." The police arrived hours later, along with federal agents. By morning, the Foundation was exposed on national television. Names of politicians, businessmen, and CEOs flashed across the screen. People who thought they were untouchable. Ron and his crew stood quietly, watching the broadcast from outside the warehouse. Maria held Lila's hand tightly, tears of relief finally falling. "It's over," she whispered. Ron looked at her with a small, tired smile. "Maybe for now. But if they ever come back," Maria interrupted softly, "then they'll find out what it means to fight someone who doesn't give up." Lila looked up at Ron. "Are you leaving, Uncle Ron?" He knelt down, his eyes warm. "Not leaving. Just riding for a while. But I'll always be around when you need me." Lila hugged him tight. "You're our hero." Ron smiled, his voice low. "No, kid. Your mama's the real hero." He stood up, nodded to Jax, and the bikers mounted their bikes. Engines thundered to life once more. As they rode off down the empty road, the morning sun rose over the horizon, washing away the darkness that had haunted them all. And for the first time in a long while, Maria and Lila stood together, safe, free, and unbroken. If this story touched your heart, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon, because we've got many more powerful and emotional stories coming your way. Your support keeps these stories alive. See you in the next story, where truth, courage, and hope meet again.